I am ready when you are. Welcome back, everybody. You've been listening to All About Healing. And if you're just tuning in, I'm Emily Francis, your host. And in the next month, starting at the beginning of July, this show is going live. So starting July 3rd, Wednesday, it will move down an hour. It will be at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can call in. We can take your calls. It's going to be a lot of fun, but the show is going live, All About Healing. So be ready for that. Today's guest was Jeff Cox, and he is partially the author. He wrote the introduction and put the book together for Instructions for Spiritual Living that was originally written by Paul Brunton. And Paul Brunton passed away in 1981, and he was known for basically the spiritual life, studying in India. He brought in a lot of information that we did not have here in the West, including he did have a best-selling book, A Search in Secret India, and he introduced Rama Maharishi to the West. So he's a huge spiritual, not a guru. He always said he was a researcher and not a guru. But this book is up for grabs. So email me for your free copy giveaway. We are only giving away one copy. EmilyAFrancis@gmail.com. That's Emily, Emily, A like Apple, Francis with an IS at gmail.com. Be the one to grab this book and I will ship it to you myself. So today's Energy Corner. It was such an interesting conversation with Jeff, and I could have picked his brain for weeks, weeks in this conversation. But I'm always very interested to speak to people that devote their life to their spiritual practice. And he lived like a monk. He never became ordained, but he lived like a monk for 5 years and has devoted his entire life, his whole adult life, to spiritual practice, and created the publishing company that is now Shambhala Publications, and they publish Pema Chodron and other Tibetan Buddhist books. So he really had quite a life himself, Jeff Cox, and he runs the Paul Brunton, or he's on the board of the Paul Brunton Foundation. Meditation is a very interesting topic because even though it's ideally the intention is universal in its practice, the way that we go about meditation or the way that we understand meditation is very unique to different cultures, different practices, different people individually. The word meditation can become quite intimidating to a lot of people, and so a lot of people shy away from it. Or the necessity to repeat the practice. There's a lot of people that believe that you need to do it at the same time each day and really cultivate a certain practice to make it effective. And one of the things that I was saying to Jeff on the show, I don't really consider myself a meditator, although I do find time every day to sit in maybe not meditation, maybe more prayer and contemplation, centering. They're all so similar, but they're not the same thing. And the way that I describe it, which doesn't make me right, but the way that I describe it is that centering is between prayer and meditation. You're centering yourself to get into a space that is going to be receptive. Prayer to me is asking for what you want, discussing. You're doing talking when you're praying. You are asking the Great Spirit to help you with something or to bless you or protect you. There's some part of you that's in dialogue in prayer. There's an intention, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's wonderful. And then meditation to me is more of opening yourself up in order to hear the response. Because when we're in prayer, we are talking, so we're not listening. We are not in that place. And then we hopefully center ourselves to get into that place to be receptive. And I think a lot of times people go into meditation and they think, okay, I want to hear the voice of God and I want to hear these answers and I want it to be spoken back to me like a voice. Like, do you remember Mork and Mindy back in the 80s? And at the end of the show, Jonathan Winters would speak to him and it was like he was in prayer and he was talking to the great spirits and they were answering to him. And I think a lot of people expect that sort of response when they go into the idea of meditating. Now, when I lived at that ashram and I did my yoga teacher training, and we would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go into the temple and do 30 minutes of meditation, and I had an incredibly hard time because I'm a hyper person, and to sit still for 30 minutes is really difficult for me. And so my teacher just told me, if you can't sit completely silent in your thoughts, then repeat a thought. So I had a mantra, or I would chant in my head to help me to organize my thoughts, or to get into a single pointed focus. Because that's also the deal, is trying to get into a place where you're single pointed focus. So the Buddhists, they refer to it as the monkey mind. It's that little rah-rah that goes on in your head, that little chatter that is really difficult to shut off. You want to get to a place where the monkey mind is not chattering anymore. But the only way to really do that is to not fight it. Because if you sit there and go, okay, shh, okay, I got to be quiet. I have to sit perfectly. I have to do this. First of all, get rid of the word have to, and get rid of the word should. And if your mind goes a little crazy, then just invite it in, because it's the only way that you're really going to diffuse it. So you just, okay, what do I need to think about? Tell me all the things now. Just come on in, but don't take a seat. So I do this little imagination where there's a funnel slide from my head to my feet. And the thoughts come into my head, but they take a seat on the slide. So they slide down and then leave through the soles of my feet into the earth to be recycled and renewed into something useful. So that's the way that I think of it. Because when you're in a place of high stress, the mind becomes like a Velcro vault. So all the thoughts that come in stick to the walls like Velcro. And that's what causes a lot of anxiety and panic, because we can't get rid of the thoughts. And then the thoughts escalate. And so if we open them up a little bit and just let them slide down, you're not pushing them at the door and saying you can't enter. You can enter, but you can take a seat on the slide and you just slide down, and then I'm going to keep moving forward in my thoughts and in my body and in my mind, so that you don't get to pay rent in my head anymore. And I've done that. I dealt with anxiety. Everybody knows this that has ever listened to the show. I dealt with really severe anxiety for a lot of years, all the while pursuing really high spiritual practices. And still I couldn't get a hold of it. And I found that fighting against those things makes it so much more difficult, and it makes it louder. So if you try to calm and squash your little inner voice, it just gets louder because it wants to be heard, even if it's just mindless. So just allow it to come in, but don't attach yourself to the thoughts. Let them come in. Don't worry about it. Don't beat yourself up over it. Let them slide down and move out, and then see where you find yourself. And I do a lot of that. I do a lot of that work more so than meditation, is just to kind of, when the thoughts become overwhelming, and everybody does this, stress is rampant all around the world, everybody. And it's very difficult because we're not taught how to control stress from a young age, which I think should be in every class from kindergarten on. I think they should put on classical music, teach them how to work with their brain and their mind and stress patterns, and learn what helps a child calm themselves. So anyway, that's Emily's Energy Corner. I hope it was helpful today. We have loved having Jeff Cox on. And again, email me for your copy of Instructions for Spiritual Living, emilyafrancis@gmail.com. You've been listening to All About Healing, and we'll see you back here next week.